National College Football Roundup. Week 11. My goodness, it's week 11 in college football. This first game is an interesting one. Number 9, Alabama, goes to Oxford to take on number 11, Ole Miss. This is your 2:30 CBS game. Alabama currently a 12-point favorite there against the Rebels. And Ted, in the grand scheme of things, this game doesn't mean much, right? Right now, there's Saban versus Kiffin. There's the rat poison. What's he saying? Don't give him goat fuel. Like he's changed it to goat fuel, which is actually pretty funny. But LSU, now with that win last week, they are in the driver's seat. They're in the SEC West. They've got the tiebreaker over both of these teams. I'm interested in this game for one reason. What does Alabama look like when the national title is no longer attainable? Not a single guy, other than the guys that have transferred in, right? Not a single guy on that roster knows what it's like to play a regular season game where the national title is not within reach. So I'm fascinated by that, man. I really am. Like, not a single guy has felt what these guys are feeling. And they just haven't experienced it. So I know we've seen Bama look more vulnerable than usual. Listen, if people want to write off Nick Saban in Alabama and say the dynasty's dead, I am not jumping on that take with you. I'm not there yet. But I'm so curious to see what it looks like, because we haven't seen Bama in this situation in the college football playoff era. We just haven't seen it.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting about it, and I agree. But they lost an unbelievably tight game at Tennessee that, frankly, may have been stolen from them because of that pass interference call, which was terrible. They lost that game, and then they lost an overtime thriller again on the road in another incredible environment to LSU, who's, been an under-the-radar, pretty daggum good football team so far. So it seems like the wheels have fallen off, but they're still just right there close to being, an undefeated team with a couple of massive victories under their belt. But that's the difference in football. I'm just saying that to point out, like, I don't think they've fallen as far as a lot of people out there are acting like. Yeah, their record is 2 losses, but they didn't lose to just nobodies out there. Lost to 2 really good football teams.
No, I agree. And no, there's this notion that Nick Saban, like, I feel like a bunch of people out there think they just have this level of success that they have because they got the best players, right? And clearly that's part of it. I don't think that guy gets near the credit he deserves for the culture he's built there. The players keep coming back. Like, everyone that I touch, like, it's not easy. It's difficult to play there, but you never hear any guys that played at Bama being like, nah, it was terrible. I hated it. Like, they all keep coming back. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit for the culture and for, the brotherhood, whatever you want to call it, that he's built there. So I feel like that's being tested in this game. I really do. Maybe I'm being dramatic, but it's almost one of these games where I look at it and go, okay, do I believe Nick Saban can motivate his players and get them ready to play when the season has already been labeled a failure? Yeah, I do. I think he can get them ready to play. I really do.
Yeah, I think what you point out is interesting. It's even more difficult to build a culture when you have the type of players that he's had.
Yeah.
Teams that have number 1 recruiting classes, it's hard to keep that together, man. You're bringing in a bunch of personalities and a bunch of egos and a bunch of guys that feel like they're entitled to play, and he's done as good a job or a better job than anyone at convincing 5-star players that it's okay to wait until you're a junior to play, right? And by that time, you're prepared physically, mentally, you know the defense, you know the offense, and you go out and you have a couple of great years, you get drafted in the first round. It seems like it would be easy, but it's not easy to convince guys of that, and he's done a great job with it.
Yeah, just looking at some of the things in that game, though, I do not think Ole Miss is going to be able to get after Bryce Young the way that LSU did. I just don't think Ole Miss has that ability to make him feel that pressure and to hit him as much as LSU did. But I've watched quite a bit of Ole Miss's running game here lately because I really like the Judkins kid, the freshman, and Zach Evans. Like that's high on the list of 1-2 running back punches in the country. So we'll see if that Bama defense holds up. But that game, it's more about what does Bama bring? Like, do they show up? I'm fascinated by that. I'll say this. I think they're going to play hard. I think Saban's made it crystal clear. Hey, the NFL scouts are still watching, boys. I think they're going to smack the hell out of Ole Miss.
Yeah, I kind of do too. And just a quick reminder for anyone that thinks that Alabama dynasty is over. They currently have the number 1 recruiting class in the country by a massive margin. So it's not like players are going to all of a sudden decide to start going elsewhere.
Yeah. All right. Next game, big one. Not the headliner, but a big one in the Big 12 Conference. Number 19, Kansas State goes to Waco to take on Baylor. Game will be 6 p.m. on FS1. Baylor is currently a 2.5-point favorite at home. This is an elimination game for me. And when it comes down to who's going to have the opportunity to go play for a Big 12 title, both teams 4-2 in the conference. Now, Kansas State, they need this win, and then they need Texas to lose to somebody, right? They need some help. They don't control their own destiny per se, but Baylor does. And it's interesting because they got Kansas State on Saturday, and they finished with TCU in Texas. Now, you can look at that going, damn, that's a rough finish to the season. But if you're Dave Aranda and you're that staff, you're selling it to your guys as, hey, man, look at this opportunity that we've got. So I know everyone's focused on TCU, Texas, and we'll talk about it. But this is when you talk about who's going to play for the Big 12 title in Arlington, like this is a huge game, man.
Yeah, I agree. And, I kind of go back and forth on Kansas State is just they're frustrating and they're hard to pinpoint. All right. I thought that they were going to get that win against Texas, but their defense kind of let them down, at least early in the game it did. And I look at Baylor and I feel like Baylor is really limited if they can't get the running game going. And I feel like Kansas State is going to be, far more disciplined and in a better spot, at least make Baylor earn it more than we did. And I feel like Kansas State can make a team like Baylor that, goes off of the 4th down analytics. Like they can just absolutely make them pay. But, you have to make those stops whenever they do go for it. And that's much easier said than done. And it feels like Baylor's trending in the right direction. And I don't know, like there's got to be a little bit of split going on in the locker room right now with Kansas State about the quarterback position. So I don't know. This game is incredibly difficult to pick for me.
I think it's going to be a really good game. Now, the one thing that we just saw, and I know that Richard Reese and Squirrel Williams are not Bijan Robinson. I understand that. But Texas ripped off some huge chunk runs against Kansas State's defense last week. So, and I think Baylor's running game, it's found a nice rhythm. And Richard Reese is going to be back because he had the flu against OU. Yeah. So I think that it feels like this game's going to come down to quarterback play for me. And I do wonder, Adrian Martinez had played so well, right? And he had taken such good care of the football. Were those late fumbles, because remember there were 2 of them, were those late fumbles against Texas, was that like the dam bursting
Yep.
for the flow of turnovers that we're about to see from Adrian Martinez. I don't know, but we've seen K-State open the offense up a little bit. I just wonder, Martinez and Shapen, who's going to make the big mistakes in this game? I mean, do we trust either of these guys? I don't know, but I know this. It is hard to go beat a good team on the road this year in the Big 12 Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Baylor's an elite team or anything like that. But it's tough for Kansas State to bounce back from that disappointing home loss to Texas and then go win in Waco. I think that's really tough. I think I like Baylor in this one. Maybe it's my Jeff Grimes bias, but I think I like Baylor.
Yeah, it's kind of hard right now to pick against Baylor with them trending in the right direction, getting a little bit healthier. To me, it all boils down to quarterback play for Kansas State. What are they going to do? Are they going to be able to open up the passing game a little bit? Because I think that's where Baylor tends to be the most vulnerable. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm going to pick Baylor. Don't feel great about it, but here we are. That's what this conference has given us so far this year.
We could both be idiots because you could also just take a step back and go, okay, which one of these teams has Deuce Vaughn? Oh, the one wearing purple. Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, maybe it ends up being that simple. We'll see, but I think it's going to be a great game. Speaking of great games, let's go. The headliner, biggest game of the year in the Big 12 Conference, number 4 TCU travels to Austin to take on the number 18 Texas Longhorns. 6:30 prime time on ABC, and Texas is a touchdown favorite. I mean, this is the type of game that, and you've talked about it a lot, Ted, this is the type of game Texas usually gets up for.
Yep.
I'm expecting them to play well, and it's going to come down to TCU's defense. Like, they got to play their best game of the season. There's just no doubt about it because Ewers looks healthy. That offensive line looks like it's playing better. I mean, clearly, the Longhorns got weapons. Bijan, Worthy, a lot of other dudes. Sanders at tight end has become quite the weapon. So I do think Texas has a better defense than TCU. They're playing really well against the run, especially. But, yeah, if TCU's defense has to play really, really well to give them a chance. Yeah. And I don't know if they're capable of it, man. They've been a little leaky.
Yeah. This is another game that I don't know how to pick. Texas to me is I still don't think they're that good. I know I've got bias built in because it's Texas, but I still see so many mistakes made and a team that is still incredibly vulnerable. But at the same time, I look at TCU and I feel like they're starting to fall apart a little bit, if that makes some sense. Like
some cracks
in the facade there. But here's the thing, man. At the end of the day, TCU is better at quarterback by a substantial margin. And if Max Duggan plays the same way that he's played for the majority of the year, I think TCU wins the football game.
I would say they're more dynamic at quarterback. Now, if you're just talking like pure passing, Ewers healthy, I'll give the guy credit. He makes some pretty damn good throws. But with what Duggan brings with his legs, he's more of a weapon, right? Like Ewers' job is to get it in the hands of Texas's weapons. Whereas Duggan, he brings a little bit of that with what he can do as a runner.
Yeah. Here's the thing too, though. Ewers is a young player, and with young players, what do you get? You get peaks and valleys, right? And we've seen that with Ewers. There's been times where he's been really good, and there's been times where he's been really bad. And you just kind of never know what you're going to get. And so far this year with Duggan, you've had like probably his best attribute has been that he's been totally consistent, like the most consistent player in college football. So which is a shock because we've seen him for more than just this 1 year. But I don't know. At this point I got to take who I think is the more consistent in the better quarterback. And I know they don't have Bijan Robinson, but TCU still got an incredible run game. I'm taking TCU.
I do think Texas has the ability to slow down Kendre Miller, and that running game could come down to what Max Duggan can do as a passer. And that's where Quentin Johnston and his availability for this game. I mean, he played like a handful of plays last week and said, no, I'm good. My ankle hurts. Like, where's he at physically? Like, he has to make big plays in this game for them. So it kind of feels like a game that TCU wins by 3 or Texas wins by 17. Like, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I do think this is one of the details games, man. It's going to come down to some key areas. I think special teams, like net special teams yardage is going to be huge. And then the red zone. I think both teams are going to move it between the 20s. Who can force field goals instead of giving up touchdowns? I think those are two things that if you keep a close eye on, those may tell you the story of this game.
Here's the last point for me with TCU. Texas, like we know what their problem has been. It's been giving up fourth quarter leads, right? I mean, that's been the real problem for them. And it didn't happen against Kansas State. It got really close to happening, but it didn't happen against Kansas State. TCU, they're not Oklahoma State. They're not Kansas State. Offensively, they have the firepower to come back at any time against Texas if they get into one of their fourth quarter lulls where they start to make mistakes, let off the gas, like whatever it is that happens to them late in those games. TCU is a team that can make up 14, 17, 21 points in an instant on you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Texas has struggled finishing games. TCU has finished games as well as any team in the country. So if it comes down to that fourth quarter, TCU may be feeling good and old Texas may be puckered up a little bit. We'll see. I think it's going to be an awesome football game. I cannot wait.